Welcome back to Small Caps. My name's Kerry Stevenson, and to all our listeners out there and our viewers, I have got something that you guys want to sit up and take notice of. Today I am talking to Steve Promnitz, the Managing Director of Lake Resources, and Stu Crow, he is the chairman. So double trouble here on the call today. And one of the things I want you guys to understand, it says Lake Resources. It's a lithium business, high purity, but it's changing the extraction process. And that's what I want to get from the guys today. I want them to explain to you why this is a game changer in the lithium market. And if you understand what's going on in lithium, yes, in the past few years, it's been a little bit on the quiet side, but I can tell you now, it is on the rise. And right now, this is an opinion. It is not financial advice. Do your own research, but I'm helping you to do your research by introducing you to these two megastars today. Welcome to Small Cap, Steve and Stu.
Thanks, Kerry. Great to be here. And you're right, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and that's why I was really keen to get both of you on. And I'll start with you, Steve. You're the Managing Director. This is a game changer for as it says in your background, a cleaner lithium electric world. And I think that's the game changer with your company. This is something which I don't think the market really fully grasps at the moment, that what you're doing in the extraction process is very unusual. So could you just give an overview to our listeners now about Lake Resources and why it's not a mining company, it's an extraction technology company?
Thank you, Kerry. So you're absolutely right. First up, we're using clean technology to produce a high purity battery material, which is lithium. And this is actually what the car makers want and the battery makers want. And we're doing that more efficiently. And we're doing that in a greener way, much smaller environmental footprint, where we return most of the fluid back to its source. And what's great about this is that as we've transitioned and as the world is transitioning from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, the sort of companies that make electric vehicles and the sort of people that buy electric vehicles don't want to be just recreating another issue with the environment that we've seen in the past. We're trying to find a better way to do it. And this charge is actually being led by the electric vehicle makers themselves. And so Stu and I, 2.5 years ago, we looked at this sector. We'd already defined a very large resource which can expand. It's in the prime location. I mean, if you pick an address, this is it. And then we've gone out.
Sorry to interrupt you, Steve. Where is the location? I think it's Argentina, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's in the lithium triangle and in Argentina. And we're specifically in Argentina versus Chile, just because the permitting process is more straightforward and you can own the leases 100%. And then with that, we wanted to find a way where we could develop these large and expandable resources in a way which is more efficient, which delivers what the market wants and does it in a more sustainable and responsible and traceable manner. And so to that end, we hunted around 2.5 years ago. We found a particular company, an unlisted entity in California called Lilac Solutions. We liked what they had because it's really well-known technology. This, what they call ion exchange, it's a water treatment that's been around since after the Second World War. Every second water treatment plant around the world, doesn't matter if it's outside Sydney or New York or London, has got an ion exchange treatment plant in it. It's just that what Lilac did was very clever. It just adapted that, re-engineered it for lithium. And so how does that work? What does that mean? It just means that we just take the lithium out of the salty water. That's less than 1% of it. And because we're not using chemicals, we can return all that back to where it comes from, back to its source. The footprint physically is like 1 or 2 city blocks instead of evaporation ponds extending over the horizon. Yeah. And we're going to be producing a product that is so much in demand now, it's going to revolutionize the sector. Basically, what we consider conventional or proven technology now is actually going to be at risk, and the market's going to move to what we're doing.
Why do you say it's going to be at risk, Steve?
Because first of all, half the world's lithium comes from lithium brines, primarily Chile and Argentina. And there's nothing wrong with that process. They pump the water out onto the surface, into ponds. It sits there for 9, 18, 24 months. The sun does its work, the water gets evaporated. You concentrate the salts to a certain economic level, and then you separate out the lithium. That's fine. But you're doing this in a hyper-arid environment. And so local communities are concerned, well, it only rains once a year here or once every 5 years. You're taking the only water resource. Okay, it's not potable. You're taking the only water resource and evaporating it. And then that's also a concern for the end user. You can imagine Mercedes, Volkswagen steps up at the end and then a shareholder says, excuse me, the product's going into your batteries. You know, you're actually destroying the only aqueous resource in a hyper-arid environment. How does that work? It's upsetting local people. So we avoid all of those water politics. Then on the other side, the other half of lithium comes from just digging a hole in the ground. Now, look, there's lots of battery materials that go into cars. That's how the world works. You know, we have to dig up a product. But if you can do it better, if you can do it more efficiently, and you can do it at the same price and produce a better quality product that's even got an ESG benefit, well, that is the place to be. And that's what we're doing. We're at the vanguard of this whole change in the industry.
Do you know, it's interesting, Steve, because you've explained that in such a good way. And I'll be honest with you, and I didn't actually fully appreciate what you guys are doing. So it's very much environmentally friendly. The footprint's much smaller. So the natural, the way most people are doing it now is they're extracting water, putting it into these large ponds, evaporating all the water. That takes up to 24 months, right? And that's the way most people are doing it now. But what you're saying is you can extract it and put the water back in where it came from.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. And the other thing, Kerry, if I can just jump in over the top of you, Steve, which is I have a habit of doing, but I apologise. But the other thing here is evaporation has been around since the Romans. You know, people used to evaporate salt ponds to get salt. You know, it's ancient technology, and it's fine. It was fine, and it is always fine when the price was low. But now you can afford to spend a little bit more doing it more efficiently. This thing's probably more than double the efficiency of just evaporation, and it delivers us. It's a consistently high purity concentrate, which we then turn into lithium carbonate at an unprecedented level from a standard flow sheet. So it's highly efficient, and that is why our technology partners attracted the likes of the Breakthrough Energy Ventures, the MIT Engine Fund, and some of the most disruptive. Those guys have all made their money out of disrupting other industries. Here we are in the lithium sector. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They can see what the opportunity is here and delivering a high purity and a clean product. It's really quite clever, but really elegant. It's so easy.
Well, what I'd like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would too, is this the way it started, or did you go into this saying, well, we're in the lithium triangle, we'll just extract lithium the way most people have done, and then you started to say, well, maybe there's a different way? I mean, talk me through the process. Did it start off as traditional, then you found Lilac Solutions and partnered with them? What was that process?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Carrie, and it actually comes to the heart of how we've gone about things. We got involved in lithium because we could see there was a real opportunity there. And we went to Chile, Argentina, because they were large projects and they were at the bottom of the cost curve. And it doesn't matter what you produce, different commodity, widgets, you've always got to be at the bottom of the cost curve. It just doesn't matter. That's where you have to be. All right, that's how we started. But it was interesting. Stu and I in particular, we spent quite a lot of time talking to cathode makers, talking to battery makers, particularly in East Asia. And almost to a one, they said, we want to know what your impurities are, and we want to know what levels those impurities are. That's going to drive whether or not we buy your product, and that's going to drive how we price that product. So once you leave, say, gold, where you can pour a bar and you can sell it anywhere, or perhaps copper where, you know, it's widely sold. Once you leave those, you've got to sit in the pocket of your end user and you've got to say, what do you want? Because what's the point of just producing another project, you know, that's in that plethora of other lithium projects or whatever commodity we're in? You've got to sit there with your end user and go, what do you want? Let's deliver that. Because that's how you get the right partnership along the supply chain. That's how you get a tier one battery maker, cathode maker, car maker wanting your product, and not just for now, but over the longer term. So they just said high purity, or should I say low impurities. So we went out looking for a process that could deliver that. And the second thing, one of our other directors, Nick Lindsay, and myself, we'd both worked in Chile in the past, back in the 90s, as well as Argentina, Peru, other South American countries. And I was surprised that here it was 2015, 2016, and we're still using evaporation process. And our concern was, when you're going to start a new project, you want to look at what are the speed bumps. What are the things that could actually stop my project happening?
Yeah.
And all of us on the board have worked on projects that, for whatever reason, didn't see the light of day. That's what this sector's like. And one of our key concerns was that if you're evaporating the water here in a hyper-arid environment, at some stage an NGO is going to come forward, or the environmental policies are going to change, or the end user is going to say, I don't really want that anymore. Look, the good thing is, with the demand we're seeing, we actually need all of these new lithium projects coming to light. But if you're at a beauty parade and you want to get your product picked out, particularly by a tier one household car maker or battery maker, you've got to have something better to offer. And so what better than exactly the product they want with an environmental benefit, and we're still producing at the same price as other brine evaporators or nearest damn it.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, but before I go on to the pricing side of things and the news flow, how did you find Lilac Solutions? Was that just purely by looking out there, knowing that your end user wanted low impurities and saying, okay, how can we, because it is a bit of a game changer using this as the partner, and how does that work? Are they a 50-50 partner? What's the structure of that like? And in terms of, shareholders would want to know, how does that?
There's a number of different extraction methods, but none of them are at the commercial scale. And so when you're a company like us or anybody else, it's very hard then to work out, well, which one of these do we work with? So we did enough background work, but at the end of the day, you've actually got to say, that looks pretty good. We've just been fortunate that through that process, we've now done 18 months of test work at labs, 6, 7, 8 months work at pilot plant module scale. We've now demonstrated that not just that it works, but it works very well on our project. Now, I can't say that it's necessarily going to work on others, but it works very well on our project. And then on top of that, during that process, they then secured the support of some of the biggest household names in investment. And so that was good third-party advocacy that maybe we'd made the right decision. All right, so that's where Lilac is. Then, because we've been working with them for some time, we have a partnership. Every R&D company, if you meet them, always thinks that whatever they have is the greatest thing in the world. And so companies like us have to work with them to do that test work, to show that it works, and also work with them to bring it to commercialization. So our partnership has exclusivity over large areas of the lithium brine in Argentina. They are continuing to work on projects in the continental US, and good luck to them. We think that's a business model just in of itself. But the lithium triangle is where the projects are. And when we look at the demand curve, it doesn't matter if we have to increase our production of lithium 5, 10 or 15 times over the next 10 years. Where is that going to come from? You've got to come from big projects that can scale up. One of the benefits of this process is it's also modular. So what we've demonstrated in one pilot module, we can then duplicate with 50 of them, maybe a little bit bigger at production scale. And then if somebody wants to expand again, we can do that again. It's just a matter of drilling some more wells and putting some more modules in place. And at the end of the day, the product, as Stu mentioned, that comes out is consistently high quality, because we know that what we do in one is going to be the same as what we do in the other 20 or so. So that's why it's exciting. And being at the forefront of this is, while it's challenging, nobody ever wants to be first. It is seriously going to change the industry.
You talked about 18 months in the test labs, 6 months or so with the pilot plant. Is there going to be a big, I guess, lead time between the pilot plant and commercialization, or are these pilot plants approximately the same size? Like if it works in the pilot plant, we don't need to build something which is 100 times the size.
Yeah, exactly. So pilot plant module at the moment, think of it as sort of like a large garage. It's that sort of size. They're a few meters high. They're a couple of meters wide. They're not small. The final modules at production scale may be a little bit larger. We're discussing with Lilac and also the engineers what might be best. would also like to have a tank, like the module that sits in, something you can just take off the shelf. That would also be good because it lowers your capital cost and increases the people you can work with. And our aim is that during the next calendar year, 2021, we're going to have a pilot plant or a demonstration plant on site. And, you know, they'll have a few modules. We're aiming for that to be at production scale. But then you just have more of them. So your scale-up risk is sort of single digits. Maybe it's 3 or 5 times. Normally a project like this, you put a pilot plant in, think of most commodities I could think of, you know, your scale-up risk is 50, 100 times, maybe even more to full production scale. So it's great to be able to de-risk this at such an early stage and get these sorts of results.
Steve, in terms of the Lilac Solutions and Lake Resources, have you got the IP over this process, or could somebody come in over the top of you and say, well, that's easy, we'll just we'll find somebody else doing the ion exchange water treatment and we'll just use the same sort of technology?
Yeah, so Lilac has the IP and they have the patents. We have a partnership with them. And it's quite possible that somewhere in the near term, there will be a public announcement which will identify a more closer relationship, but we'll wait until that occurs. It's important that they as a company can demonstrate that this can be commercialized on a project that's also large enough. Because this is how it works. If you've got a new technology and you're one of the big guys, and you've already spent $500 million, $1.5 billion, $3 billion on everything that's there, you're not overly keen to then say to your shareholders and everybody else, oh, well, forget about all of that capital, just write that off, we're going to do something different. It doesn't generally go down well in the market. Generally, those changes only occur when they have to. And so it's quite possible that because of the changes in the market driven by the car makers, that those changes will occur. And if you're first, or one of the first, you show it commercialized, you get into production, the power of being into production and then scale up because you've already got the relationships in the supply chain, that's very powerful, and there's then a barrier to potential new entrants.
I'm curious as to what the end user has been saying, because you said at the start of this interview that you have been out there talking to the end user. Are they very supportive of what you're doing? Because as I said at the start as well, this is clean technology, it's more efficient, and it's playing into this whole thing of you're actually not a resources company, you're more of a technology company. Are the end users sitting up and saying, we want to back this one?
Look, I'm going to handball that one to Stu, but if I could just say, all of those conversations are naturally commercial in confidence. But what I can say about what's public, what's public is that Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, Daimler, to a lesser extent Tesla, and the whole EU Commission have come out and publicly stated we want more sustainable, traceable, responsibly sourced battery materials going into the batteries that power our cars. And so we're part of that solution.
And Lake Resources are at the forefront of of covering all of that.
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say everyone's heading down that path, Kerry, but we, through this process, have a pretty good head start, and the response that we're getting from the sector is really encouraging. And obviously, as Steve said, there's only so much we can say on that, but you know, the idea of this pilot plant is to create some samples. And during COVID, we obviously hoped that we'd have a pilot plant on site by now, but we're doing that in California, and we're shipping brines into California to treat through the pilot process to deliver samples to potential off-takers. And then another exciting part of that is our arrangements with Novonix. And I'll get Steve to chat about that, because that in itself is a very exciting time for us, and testing this high quality product in a cathode and battery environment that we can scrutinize, show up against the other batteries in the space.
Steve, do you want to talk about the Novonix?
Yeah, so Kerry, whenever there's a new producer, there are certain barriers to entry to that new producer, particularly to tier one battery makers and car makers. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. That's just how the industry works. And so we're in the process of sending out samples to some off-takers, and we'll be sending out more in the near term. But to be blunt, that's a pretty opaque process. Yes, they take our samples, they start with sort of half a kilo or a few hundred grams. And then if that's good, then they'll get maybe 20 kilos or so. And then when you get down to the last 2 or 3, you might send them quite large bulk samples. But the feedback loop is fairly opaque. And so we're not absolutely certain how that goes. Moreover, we'd like to be able to break through and not just talk to cathode makers and battery makers, but actually to their end users and say to electric vehicle makers, you might not sign an offtake agreement with us, but if you want this in your supply chain, talk to us and then talk to your battery makers so that we can close that loop.
Yeah.
They're the alliances we're trying to close. All right, so where does Novonix fit into that? What's great about Novonix is that they're a very well-known and respected entity in the battery supply chain without being a major battery maker themselves. What they do is they go and test batteries for everybody else. Think of a household name, Panasonic, CATL, the biggest battery maker, Dyson, Apple, SK, you name it. They get tested by Novonix. And they're also been at the cutting edge of battery technology on the anode and the cathode side in the battery. So by getting them to take our high purity product and put it into a fairly standard high-end battery, a 622 battery, then by showing that that works in a cell and in a pack, that then helps our discussions when an electric vehicle maker goes, yeah, but I don't know you guys, is all this true? You go, hey, here's a respected third party, they've run it in the battery. It's just like we got a respected third party at Hazen to convert what comes out of Lilac's process and make it into a saleable product. And by constantly getting that third party advocacy and independent checking, that's how you make that change. And look, honestly, Novonix at the cutting edge, there's only a couple that are in that space. So we're very happy to be working with them.
Okay, so it sounds to me like there's a lot of foundation work, quite a bit of de-risking that's been going on. You guys have been, in my opinion, you've been working very quietly in the background. I'm excited that you're on the Small Caps platform because I love showcasing companies like you guys, especially when it's like, this is environmentally friendly, it's clean technology, it's efficient. But what I want to know, and I want you guys to tell our people listening at the moment, why should investors be sitting up and taking notice of you guys? I mean, you've explained the technology very well and the reasons you're doing it. I love the fact that you can extract the lithium and put the water back in. That, to me, is a game changer. But that's me looking at it from a world environment side of things. But what can they expect to hear? Is there going to be lots of news flow? And why is now the time for people to look at lake resources?
Okay. Kerry, can I just say, if we start with the actual market, what we're seeing here, I've never seen in 30 years in the financial markets. We've got legislated disruption. Announced last week, the UK, you won't be able to sell a petrol or a diesel car in 2030. You have to adopt the disruption of electrification of transport. Unprecedented. How good's that? So for us, that just sends the demand exponential.
Yeah.
We've now got this product that we're delivering. It's high purity. No one's ever done that from a standard flow sheet. So from our point of view, as a company, the bases are loaded. We are ready. The next step from here is when we align with a industry participant, either as a potential funding partner, development partner on the project, or an off-taker. And we've seen recently, and over the last few years, what happens next. It's a set move. We've seen Lithium America partner with SQM and then Ganfeng go from 35 million market cap to being listed on the New York Stock Exchange over $1 billion. We've seen Kidman. We all remember Kidman. SQM came in there, same story. They got taken out at a massive increase in price. Just recently, we saw Tesla sidle up alongside Piedmont Lithium. Their share price increased dramatically, and they've subsequently gone on from there. And here we are sitting there ready. We've got the product. We're sending it out for testing, and we're moving forward towards production. And I'll get Steve. That's the exciting bit. That's the razzle dazzle. I'll let Steve give you the technical sort of the analysis
where we fit in the market, and then specifically for Lake versus others. One of the ways to try and work out what a company is worth is what we talked about, what are you offering that's different? And you can see by having a product that's higher purity, better quality than others is a key differentiator, and having that being with an ESG benefit, more environmentally appropriate, is certainly a key benefit. But the other is when we look at the valuation of the actual project itself. So when we did our pre-feasibility study, the value of the project, NPV 8 after tax, is about 750 million. And that was using a fairly conservative flat forward price, $11,000 a tonne. The product that we're producing gets a premium price. If we put, now we're still in the price discovery phase. I can't come out publicly yet and say what it is that we could get, because nobody's been able to produce this sort of quality at scale. But the pricing varies between, well, lowest we've seen is $15,500 a tonne, and we've seen prices north of $25,000 a tonne. If we put the lowest number in our model, that immediately doubles the NPV north of $1.6 billion. It immediately makes the cash flow so that every year's cash flow is like equal to half of the actual capex to build the damn thing. So the thing starts to become a money machine. And when you look at the fact that we're currently trading about 2 or 3% of that NPV value right now, and half of that if we increased it, and our peers are trading anywhere from 10 to 40% NPV, that is really the kicker. And you don't see many of these sorts of companies in any sector where you've done a lot of the heavy lifting, and all that's happening now is this last 12 months to actually run us over the finish line. It's both an exciting time for the company, it's an exciting time in the sector, because I'm also presenting on international conferences, and so is Stu, because people want to hear this sort of stuff. The ESG investing, just to give you an idea, has grown from around 10 or 12% back in 2018 to now 1/3 of the total funds under management in the US. And if that's what they're doing, the rest of the world is going to do that as well. So if you want to attract the sort of capital you want, you've got to get into this sort of space. And that's something that we can actually offer ASX investors that are interested in ASX listed companies.
I think it's absolutely fascinating, guys, and I want to get you back on the small caps platform at the next hurdle. Not hurdle, but it's exciting. You know, you've done a lot of the groundwork. You've been flying under the radar. It took me a while to get you to come and chat to me, but we're here now. I'm excited for our investors to hear the story, guys. It's not just about mining. This company changing the way lithium is extracted. They're doing it in a very clean, environmentally sustainable way. I wish you all the best, guys. Exciting times ahead, and you're only just getting started. Any final comments?
Watch this space, Kerry. It's all good from here. Thanks very much for the time.
Great to talk to you.
We've got a bunch of news that's going to be coming out, and as Stu mentioned, when we start to flag some of the things, both with the parties that we're talking to and how this will then get financed into production, I think people will stand up and go, wow, we should have got into this earlier. So thanks so much.
That's a great way to end it. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kez. Thank you.